So we believe this may be the last of our long series on all of the things related to E&Ms and CMT and RVUs and diagnosis codes and all of the different things that go into this whole mix. Again, we want our doctors to be appropriately paid for the services that you perform. You provide a good and valuable service, and you deserve to be paid for it. And so this last component that we really want to touch on, Dr. William nails down a new concept that is a little bit different. But give us some background a little bit first before we dig into the nitty gritty of this one, because it seems really simple on the surface. But when we start talking about E&M, don't go into full detail. I know that you could do a full webinar on this, but the difference in MDM and documenting time when we start talking about what level of E&M are you performing?
Yeah, first, let me say that ICS members have access to a recorded webinar that does a deep dive on how to get the right level. And I can talk about E&M coding and picking the right code for days on end. But the E&M guidelines were dramatically updated, changed in 2021. And what they did was they said, instead of looking at these key components and stuff, you can choose your code based upon one of two elements, either the time that you've documented or the medical decision making. And when it comes to medical decision making, that's all about your brain power and how much you have to work on it and how complex it is for the patient. And you can read about that in an article available to you in the ICS and also watch the webinar. But then there's the time element. And the way that rule changed was it's about all the time that's spent face-to-face with the patient and non-face-to-face. They say if you document the time, that alone can be enough to explain. So, for example, if you hit 10 minutes, you can bill a 99212. If you hit 20 minutes, you can bill a 99213, as an example for re-exams. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that concept of documenting time and help us get paid for this when we are challenging this bundling issue. We can leverage the concept. So we can actually document time. It will help us in two ways. One, it will help support the level of the E&M service if we document sufficient time. But two, it'll help us show that this service for the E&M was significant and separately identifiable from the CMT. And it's actually really easy. What you do, now it's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to take you an extra 10 seconds to type it into your note, perhaps. What you do is you say, I took this amount of time to do the E&M service. Now, instead of just saying I took 20 minutes, put the start and stop time. Say, I started my E&M at 12:33 p.m. and I ended it at 12:43 p.m. or 53 p.m., whatever time it took. That makes it very clear that you weren't spending that time doing anything else. You're with the patient doing the exam, and that's great. And that will help justify the level of E&M. But the key here for the 2.5 modifier, if you did a CMT that day as well, is you document a separate time block for the CMT. You say, well, I know my exam was at 12:33. My adjustment was done either before or after the exam, separately. It wasn't done at the same time. I didn't do a little of each and go back and forth. What I did was I did all the work that's tied into adjusting a patient, and I documented that I did that from 12:25 to 12:33 or whatever the time was. And I did that, and it took me 5 minutes to do an adjustment. And you make it really clear in the note. You say, here's my adjustment. It happened in this time frame. And then you pause, you take a breath, and you go to a new page in your record, which we talked about in another video, and you say, okay, at this time, I began to do my exam, or the other order, whichever you feel is most clinically appropriate based upon what you're trying to do with your patient. But separate the time blocks. Document, take that extra time it takes to say the time you started and stopped each separate service, and that makes it much, much harder for someone to claim that those services are the same service. They're totally separate. If I go back to my pie metaphor one last time, I made one pie and I stopped making that pie and I started making the next pie, and I didn't make them at the same time. And you're telling that clearly in your documentation. So that's a powerful, powerful way to just break those apart, and good luck challenging it.
And it becomes inarguable at that stage, right? There's no argument that could be made that they were bundled together because you clearly documented the time. So yes, it's extra work. Yes, it's an extra step. But when you bundle this, pardon the expression, but when you combine all of these different tips, right? All 6 of these areas that are covered in Dr. Williams' toolkit, at the end of the day, we believe that creates this ironclad argument that becomes purely defendable. and actually offensible, right? It could ultimately be used in an offensive approach. And by the way, the Illinois Chiropractic Society has been on the offensive on this as much as humanly possible. We have not just sat down and met with Blue Cross Blue Shield time and time again with this issue and this bundling problem. But we've also actually sat down with the AMA and prompted the AMA to actually go through and make some modifications to the CPT assistant. You can see some of that work that was done a handful of years ago, as well as we worked with the AMA to ensure that that got more appropriately identified. We still think that there's work to be done there, but that's a discussion for another day. But all of these things are ways that you can basically begin to empower yourself to win these arguments on appeal. And hopefully we never have to get to the appeal. Hopefully the claim forms tell that story up front, that your time documentation makes it clear, and when you send it in, ultimately it gets paid, and we can eliminate this 25 modifier situation where ultimately you win enough appeals, you demonstrated enough on your claim form where we don't see the denials anymore, and you are getting properly paid for the services that you're rendering. You deserve to be paid for the services that you provide to your patients when you bring them back to health.
Yeah, I'm going to add, I believe this toolkit is the best information available, the best ideas that we've been able to come up with, researching, conversing with other experts, and making you as equipped as possible to get paid properly for the work that you're doing. So we hope that you can leverage it and use this to be able to practice chiropractic while you're getting paid and take care of more patients and live happily ever after.
There it is. Thank you all, and we'll catch you next week.